The day of my brother's wedding, I caught my husband in the wine cellar with the bride, plotting to murder me for my $8 million Charles fund. But what they didn't know was that my brother had already discovered their plan, and the entire wedding was actually an Interpol sting operation. What happened next turned a day of celebration into the most dramatic takedown I've ever witnessed, and revealed a family secret I never saw coming. My name is Natasha Williams, and this is the story of how my perfect life shattered and then rebuilt itself in the most unexpected way. It was a perfect September afternoon in Napa Valley, the kind of day that makes you believe in fairy tales and happy endings. The vineyard estate where my brother Terrence was getting married stretched out in endless rows of green and gold, with the California sun painting everything in that warm, honey-colored light that makes even the worst moments look beautiful in photographs. I stood in the bridal suite, adjusting my maid of honor dress, a flowing sage green number that Yara, my future sister-in-law, had picked out specifically because she said it brought out my eyes. She was always so thoughtful like that, or at least, that's what I believed at the time. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way Yara would touch my husband Marcus's arm just a little too long when she laughed at his jokes. The way Marcus always seemed to know exactly where Yara was in any room, his eyes tracking her movements like a predator watches prey. The hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I walked into a room, but I was blind. Stupidly, naively blind. I was a pediatric surgeon, for God's sake. I spent my days making life and death decisions, reading the smallest signs in a child's symptoms to diagnose rare conditions. But I couldn't see the cancer growing in my own life. My brother Terrence had built his tech company from nothing, turning a college dorm room idea into a $100 million enterprise by the age of 35. He was my hero, my protector, my everything after our parents died. When our childhood home burned down 5 years ago with our parents inside, Terrence held me while I screamed. He planned the funeral while I couldn't get out of bed. He made sure I ate, made sure I breathed, made sure I survived. The fire investigators ruled it an accident, faulty wiring in the old house, but something about it never sat right with me. Our father was an electrician. He was obsessive about safety. But grief has a way of making you doubt your own instincts, and eventually I stopped asking questions. After our parents died, I inherited their life insurance and savings, a trust fund worth $8 million that I barely touched. I didn't want blood money. I wanted my parents back. I threw myself into my work at the Children's Hospital, performing surgery after surgery, saving other people's children because I couldn't save my own family. And Marcus, my husband of 3 years, he was there through all of it. Supportive, patient, understanding. He was a financial advisor at one of Chicago's most prestigious firms, and everyone said we were the perfect power couple. The successful surgeon and the brilliant money manager. What a joke that turned out to be. When Terrence introduced us to Yara 18 months ago, I was thrilled. She was beautiful, sophisticated, with this exotic accent she said came from growing up all over Europe as a diplomat's daughter. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveling constantly, which explained why she seemed so worldly and polished. She and Terrence had met at a charity gala, one of those black tie events where Chicago's elite pretend to care about causes while really just networking and showing off. Their romance was like something out of a movie, fast and passionate. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, they were planning this elaborate destination wedding in Napa Valley. I should have questioned the speed of it all. I should have wondered why Yara never talked about her family, why none of them were coming to the wedding. She said they were estranged, that her childhood had been difficult despite the diplomatic lifestyle, that Terrence and I were her real family now. And I ate it up like the fool I was. I was so happy my brother had found love. I was so grateful to have a sister, something I'd always wanted as a little girl. I helped Yara plan every detail of this wedding. We spent hours together choosing flowers, tasting cakes, selecting the perfect shade of blush for the table linens. She confided in me about everything, or so I thought. She told me about her fears of not being good enough for Terrence, about her insecurities, about her dreams of starting a family. We cried together. We laughed together. We became sisters before the wedding ever happened. But over the past month, I'd noticed something off. Terrence seemed distant with Yara, almost cold. At the rehearsal dinner the night before, I caught him watching her with this strange expression, something between disgust and calculation. When I asked him about it, pulling him aside in concern, he just smiled and said he was stressed about work. But my brother never brought work stress to personal events. It wasn't like him. I thought maybe he was having cold feet, second thoughts about marriage. I even considered talking to him about it, suggesting they postpone if he wasn't sure. Thank God I didn't. Thank God I trusted him. The wedding ceremony itself was breathtaking. 200 guests sat in white chairs arranged in perfect rows overlooking the vineyard. Yara walked down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars, all lace and crystals and dramatic train. She looked like a prince. She looked innocent and pure and beautiful. She looked like everything a bride should be, and it was all a lie. Every smile, every tear she shed during the vows, every loving glance at my brother, it was all performance. And I stood there like an idiot, holding her bouquet, crying happy tears, completely unaware that the woman I'd called my sister was planning to murder both me and my brother. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, Yara pulled me aside. She hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for welcoming me into your family, Natasha. You and Terrence are everything to me. I promise I'll be the best sister you could ever have." I hugged her back, feeling emotional and grateful. Meanwhile, my husband Marcus was across the terrace, laughing with some of Terrence's business partners, looking handsome in his tailored suit, looking like the man I'd pledged my life to, looking like someone I could trust. God, the betrayal burns even hotter when I think about how thoroughly they fooled me. The reception was scheduled to start at 6, but at 5:30, Yara asked me to do her a favor. She needed a specific vintage wine from the estate's cellar for a special toast she wanted to make. She said it was a surprise for Terrence, a bottle from the year we were born. It was supposed to be symbolic, romantic. She was too busy with photographs to get it herself, and she trusted only me with this important task. Of course I agreed. Of course I was happy to help. I was the perfect little puppet, dancing on strings I couldn't even see. The wine cellar was in the lower level of the main estate building, accessed through a heavy wooden door and down a stone staircase that looked like something out of a European castle. The air got cooler as I descended, that particular musty smell of aged wine and old stone filling my nose. Rows and rows of bottles stretched out in the dim lighting, organized by year and region. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight, trying to find the birth year section Yara had mentioned. That's when I heard voices, low, intimate, coming from deeper in the cellar. I should have announced myself. I should have called out, but something stopped me. Some instinct, finally kicking in way too late. I moved quietly toward the voices, and that's when I saw them. My husband Marcus had Yara pressed against the wine racks, his hands on her waist, her fingers tangled in his hair. They were kissing like lovers who couldn't get enough of each other, like people who had done this 1,000 times before. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It short-circuited, trying to make sense of impossible information. This was my husband. This was my new sister-in-law. This was supposed to be her wedding day. This was supposed to be... And then they started talking, and everything got so much worse. "After tonight, your sister won't suspect a thing," Marcus said, his voice thick with satisfaction. Poor naive Natasha. She trusts everyone. Yara laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was nothing like the sweet, musical laugh I'd heard from her for the past year and a half. This laugh was cold, calculated, cruel. She makes it too easy. All that money just sitting there, waiting for us to take it. Your stupid wife doesn't even spend it. What's the point of $8 million if you're going to live like a middle-class doctor? My legs went weak. I grabbed the wine rack to keep from falling, my heart hammering so hard I thought they might hear it. $8 million. My trust fund. They were talking about my inheritance from my dead parents. Once I get her to sign those trust fund papers next week, we're set for life, Marcus continued, his hands roaming over Yara's body like he had every right to touch her, like he wasn't wearing a wedding ring, like he wasn't married to me. My contact at the bank will process everything before anyone realizes what happened. And Terrence? Yara asked, pulling back slightly to look at Marcus. Your sister won't be a problem after the accident during your Bali trip. But we still need to deal with my dear husband. The word accident hit me like a physical blow. They were planning to kill me. My husband and my sister-in-law were planning to murder me and make it look like an accident during our anniversary trip to Bali next month. The trip Marcus had been so insistent about planning, saying we needed time to reconnect, to remember why we fell in love. It was all a setup. All of it. Marcus kissed Yara's neck and said, Terrence's company stock becomes yours, as his widow within the year. We just need to be patient. The toxin you got from your pharmaceutical contacts is untraceable. Small doses over months, everyone will think it's a tragic illness. Young, healthy tech mogul suddenly develops mysterious symptoms, deteriorates, dies. So sad, so unexpected. And his grieving widow inherits everything. Split 50-50 just like we planned, Yara said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You and I, baby, like it's always been. 5 years of planning, and it's finally coming together. 5 years. They'd been together for 5 years, which meant Marcus had been with Yara before he even met me, which meant our entire marriage was a lie from the very beginning. I wasn't his wife. I was his mark. I was a target, a payday, a stepping stone to the life he wanted with another woman. I must have made a sound, some small gasp or whimper of pain, because they both froze. But before they could turn around, before they could see me, a hand clamped over my mouth and an arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me backward into the shadows. I tried to scream, tried to fight, my doctor brain already thinking about defensive wounds and how to survive an attack, but then a familiar voice whispered in my ear, It's me. Don't make a sound. Terrence. My brother had been in the wine cellar, watching them, listening to them. He held me tight as I shook, as silent tears streamed down my face, as my entire world collapsed. He slowly moved us back toward the stairs, keeping to the darkest parts of the cellar, while Marcus and Yara continued their disgusting conversation, now talking about where they'd go after they had all the money. Paris, maybe? Or the Maldives. Somewhere beautiful where they could finally be together openly. Terrence got me up the stairs and into a small private office off the main hallway. He locked the door behind us, and only then did he let me go. I collapsed into a chair, my whole body shaking, my mind racing with questions and horror and betrayal so deep it felt like drowning. I looked up at my brother, this man who had protected me my whole life, and I saw something in his face that shocked me almost as much as what I just witnessed in the cellar. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He was calm, focused, alert, like a general about to go into battle. I know, he said before I could even speak. Natasha, I know everything. I've known for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. While I'd been helping Yara pick out centerpieces and addressing wedding invitations, my brother had known she was planning to murder us both. While I'd been sleeping next to Marcus every night, trusting him with my life, Terrence had known he was plotting my death. The betrayal multiplied, layers upon layers of deception. How? I managed to choke out. How long have they— Sit down and let me explain everything, Terrence said, his voice gentle but urgent. We don't have much time before we need to go back out there, and you need to understand what's happening tonight. He pulled up a chair across from me and took my hands in his. His grip was strong, steady, grounding me when I felt like I might fly apart into a million pieces. And then he told me a story that was so much worse than anything I could have imagined. 6 weeks ago, Terrence had started noticing something strange. Yara had become obsessed with his medical history, asking detailed questions about his health, his family medical background, whether anyone in our family had a history of heart disease or cancer or neurological disorders. At first, he thought she was just worried about their future children, about genetic risks. But the questions became more probing, more clinical. She wanted to know about his vitamins, his supplements, what medications he took, what he ate for breakfast every morning. Then he noticed she'd been researching things on his home computer, using his Wi-Fi. He didn't snoop intentionally, but he'd been having internet issues, and when he checked the router history to troubleshoot, he found searches that made his blood run cold. Undetectable poisons. Substances that mimic natural illness. How to cause gradual organ failure. Inheritance laws for surviving spouses in Illinois. Terrence had immediately hired a private investigator, one of the best in the country. He didn't want to believe what he was seeing. He hoped there was an explanation. Maybe she was researching for a pharmaceutical presentation or writing a mystery novel. Anything but what it looked like. But the investigator came back with information that turned this from a suspicion into a nightmare. Yara wasn't who she claimed to be. Her real name was Kira Volkov, and she was wanted by Interpol in connection with multiple suspicious deaths across 3 countries. She was what they call a black widow, a woman who seduces wealthy men, marries them, and then they die in convenient accidents or sudden illnesses, leaving her to inherit their fortunes. And she'd done it at least twice before that they could prove, probably more times that they couldn't. Her first husband, a shipping magnate in Greece, died in a boating accident 3 years into their marriage. He was an experienced sailor, but somehow he fell overboard during a sunset cruise and drowned. Yara inherited his entire estate, worth approximately 30 million euros. She stayed in Greece for 6 months, playing the grieving widow, and then disappeared. Her second husband, a real estate developer in Dubai, died of sudden cardiac arrest 2 years into their marriage. He was 41 years old, in perfect health, ran marathons, but one morning he collapsed in their penthouse and was dead before the ambulance arrived. Yara inherited his property portfolio, worth approximately $50 million. She stayed in Dubai for a year, and then she vanished again. Both times, authorities had investigated. Both times, they couldn't find any concrete evidence of foul play. The deaths looked like tragic accidents, like bad luck. But Interpol had been building a case, connecting the dots, tracking her movements. They'd been looking for Kira Volkov for 2 years, and she'd been sitting in my brother's home, planning his murder, planning mine, pretending to be sweet and loving and innocent. But it got worse. The investigator didn't just find information about Yara. He found information about Marcus, too. My husband, the respected financial advisor, was wanted in New York for embezzlement. He'd been stealing from his clients for years, particularly elderly clients who trusted him with their retirement funds. He'd created false statements, phantom investments, and slowly drained their accounts while making it look like bad market performance. By the time anyone noticed, he'd embezzled over $12 million. He'd fled New York 18 months ago, just before authorities were about to arrest him. He'd moved to Chicago, changed firms, started fresh, and that's when he'd met me, or rather, targeted me. a grieving woman with an $8 million trust fund and no family except one brother. I was perfect for their plan. Because here's the thing that I learned that broke my heart all over again. Marcus and Yara had been partners for 5 years, long before either of them met me or Terrence. They ran this scam together, traveling the world, finding wealthy targets, seducing them, killing them, and taking their money. Sometimes they both married into the same family, like they were doing with us. Sometimes they worked separately, but they were a team, a murderous, sociopathic team. And our parents' house fire 5 years ago, the investigator found evidence that it wasn't an accident at all. The same chemical accelerant used in that fire had been used in another suspicious death connected to Kira Volkov in Athens. The fire happened right when our parents were about to update their wills. If they lived another week, they would have put their entire estate in a trust that neither Terrence nor I could access until we were 40 years old. But they died, and we inherited immediately. Looking back, Marcus had been so helpful after their deaths, offering to manage my inheritance, to protect it for me. He'd been circling me like a shark from the very beginning. Terrence told me all of this in a quiet, controlled voice while I sat there in shock. Every word was another knife in my heart, another layer of betrayal, another piece of my reality crumbling. But then he told me something that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time, something that turned my grief and shock into rage. "This wedding is a trap," he said. "I contacted Interpol 7 weeks ago after the investigator found Yara's real identity. They've been working with the FBI and local authorities to build a case we can actually prosecute. The wedding isn't real, Natasha. I mean, we went through the ceremony, but I had my lawyer draw up papers that invalidate it based on fraud and false identity. This whole day, this whole event, is an Interpol sting operation." I couldn't breathe. I literally could not get air into my lungs. My brother's wedding, this beautiful, elaborate, expensive wedding I'd helped plan for months, was actually a law enforcement trap. "Half the guests out there are undercover agents," Terrence continued. "The photographer is Interpol. 3 of the groomsmen are FBI. The wedding planner is a federal prosecutor. We've wired every room in this estate with cameras and audio. Everything Marcus and Yara have said and done today has been recorded. But we need more. We need them to actually attempt the crime." He explained the rest of the plan, and it was so audacious, so dangerous that I almost refused to participate. Almost. But then I thought about my parents, burning alive in their home because these monsters wanted their money. I thought about the 2 men who had died at Yara's hands, their families left grieving and confused. I thought about the elderly clients Marcus had robbed, people who had trusted him with their life savings. And I thought about how close I'd come to being their next victim, to dying in some staged accident in Bali, leaving behind nothing but questions and grief. So I agreed. I agreed to walk back out into that reception and pretend everything was fine. I agreed to smile and laugh and play the role of the happy sister-in-law and devoted wife. I agreed to drink from a glass I knew would be poisoned, to help catch these monsters in the act. Terrence explained that Yara would offer me a special champagne toast during the reception, supposedly in my honor as her new sister. But the champagne would be laced with the toxin she'd obtained through her pharmaceutical contacts, the same poison she'd been planning to use on Terrence. It was a slow-acting poison, designed to mimic a sudden illness. I would appear to have a heart attack or stroke, be rushed to the hospital, and probably die within hours, and Marcus would inherit everything as my husband, but I wouldn't actually drink the poison. Terrence had arranged for the champagne glasses to be marked with an invisible ink that only showed under UV light. I would receive the marked glass, pretend to drink, but actually spit the liquid into a napkin. Meanwhile, Terrence would drink from his own glass, which had been secretly replaced with a harmless version that would make him appear to have symptoms. He'd collapse, and in the chaos, we'd catch Marcus and Yara revealing themselves. Can you do this? Terrence asked me, holding my face in his hands like he'd done when I was a little girl and had nightmares. Can you be strong enough to go out there and face them? I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and felt something hard and cold settle in my chest. Yes, I could do this. I would do this. For my parents, for Terrence, for myself, for every victim these sociopaths had destroyed. I stood up, fixed my makeup in the small mirror on the wall, and transformed my face into a mask of happiness. If they wanted a performance, I'd give them one they'd never forget. We walked back out into the reception together, brother and sister, united like we'd always been. The sun was starting to set, painting the vineyard in shades of pink and gold. String lights twinkled above the reception area where round tables were set with those blush linens Yara and I had picked out together. It looked magical. It looked perfect. It looked like the setting for a love story, not a crime scene. Marcus immediately appeared at my side, sliding his arm around my waist in that familiar, possessive way that used to make me feel protected. Now it made my skin crawl. There you are, baby. I was wondering where you'd gone. His voice was warm, concerned, loving. How had I never heard the lie underneath it? Just helping Yara with something, I said, keeping my voice light and cheerful. I leaned into him, playing my role, even though every cell in my body screamed to run. You know how it is, maid of honor duties. Yara was across the terrace, posing for photographs with Terrence. She looked radiant, glowing with happiness, the perfect bride. When she saw me looking, she waved and blew me a kiss. I blew one back, smiling wide, pretending my heart wasn't shattered into a million pieces. God, she was good. If I hadn't seen her in that wine cellar with my own eyes, if I hadn't heard her casually discussing my murder, I would never have suspected her of anything more sinister than maybe being a little shallow. Dinner was served, an elaborate 5-course meal that probably cost a fortune. I pushed food around my plate, pretending to eat, laughing at jokes, chatting with the guests at our table. Marcus kept his hand on my thigh the entire time, occasionally leaning over to kiss my temple or whisper something sweet in my ear. Each touch felt like a violation. Each kiss felt like poison. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stab him with my fork. I wanted to stand up and tell everyone what he really was, but I didn't. I played my part. After dinner, as dessert was being served, Yara stood up with her champagne glass and tapped it with her fork to get everyone's attention. The conversation died down, and all eyes turned to the bride. She looked beautiful and nervous, like a woman about to make an emotional speech at her wedding. And maybe in some twisted way, she was nervous. Maybe even sociopaths feel something when they're about to commit murder in front of 200 witnesses. I want to make a special toast, Yara began, her voice carrying across the terrace in the warm evening air. As most of you know, Terrence and I don't have a large family. We've both experienced loss and loneliness. But when I met Terrence, I didn't just gain a husband. I gained a sister. Natasha has been more than a sister-in-law to me. She's been my friend, my confidant, my family. I felt Marcus squeeze my thigh, probably thinking I was getting emotional. I was, just not in the way he thought. So I want to honor her with a special champagne, Yara continued, a vintage from the year she and Terrence were born, symbolizing how they welcomed me into their family. She gestured to a server, who brought out a silver tray with several champagne flutes. The glasses sparkled in the candlelight, beautiful and deadly. Terrence caught my eye from across the table. He gave me the smallest nod. This was it. This was the moment. Yara picked up one of the glasses and walked over to me. She handed it to me with both hands, her eyes shining with what looked like genuine affection. To my sister Natasha, thank you for everything. I took the glass, feeling its weight in my hand. Somewhere in this beautiful crystal was enough poison to kill me. Somewhere in this liquid were dissolved the same chemicals that had probably killed those men in Greece and Dubai, that had been slowly poisoning my brother through his morning coffee for weeks. This was attempted murder, happening right now, in front of everyone, hidden behind the veneer of a loving toast. I don't know what to say, I said, letting my voice crack with emotion. Not hard to do, considering I was actually emotional, just not in the way they thought. You've been such a gift to our family, Yara. I'm so happy you and Terrence found each other. The lies tasted like ash in my mouth, but I smiled through them. Marcus stood up beside me, raising his own glass. To family, he said, looking at me with what I used to think was love. Now I saw it for what it was. Anticipation. He was watching me, waiting for me to drink, eager for his plan to finally come to fruition. Everyone raised their glasses. The moment stretched out, surreal and terrible, and then I brought the glass to my lips. I let the liquid touch my mouth, tilted my head back as if drinking deeply, but I didn't swallow. I held the champagne in my mouth, using the technique actors use for drinking scenes, and when I lowered the glass, I quickly pressed my napkin to my lips as if wiping away a drop, and spit the poison into the cloth. No one noticed. Everyone was drinking their own champagne, making toasts, celebrating, except Terrence. My brother had actually drunk from his glass, the one that had been specially prepared by the FBI to give him symptoms without actually harming him. He'd insisted on being the one to collapse, said it would be more dramatic, more likely to make them reveal themselves. I'd argued, but he'd been adamant. He was protecting me, like he always had. We all sat back down. Dessert continued. Conversation resumed. And we waited. Terrence had said it would take about 15 minutes for the symptoms to start. He'd been given something that would cause his heart rate to spike, his blood pressure to drop, and his skin to take on a grayish pallor. It would look like a heart attack or stroke. It would look like exactly what Yara's poison was supposed to cause. I watched the minutes tick by on my watch, each second feeling like an hour. Marcus kept asking if I was okay, saying I looked pale, suggesting I should drink some water. The irony of him pretending to care about my health while he just tried to poison me was almost funny. Almost. And then it happened. Terrence stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. His hand went to his chest and his face contorted in pain. I can't breathe, he gasped. The reaction was immediate. People jumped up, shouting. Someone screamed. Terrence staggered, reaching for the table for support, and then his legs gave out and he collapsed onto the ground. Yara shrieked, a perfect imitation of a terrified bride, and dropped to her knees beside him. Someone call an ambulance, she screamed. Terrence, baby, stay with me. I ran to my brother's side, falling to my knees on the other side of him. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and rapid. Even knowing this was an act, even knowing he was okay, my heart clenched with fear. This was my brother, my protector, my only family. And he was lying on the ground at his own wedding reception, pretending to die, all to catch the monsters who tried to destroy us. Paramedics rushed over, part of the team Terrence had arranged. They began working on him, checking his vitals, starting an IV, loading him onto a stretcher. The performance was flawless. Guests were crying, hugging each other. Their beautiful evening turned into a nightmare. And then I saw it. While everyone was focused on Terrence being loaded into the waiting ambulance, while Yara was sobbing dramatically into her hands, I saw Marcus and Yara exchange a look. Just for a second. Just long enough for him to give her a small nod and for her to smile. Not a sad smile, not a worried smile, a satisfied smile. A smile that said, it worked. My vision went red. Pure white-hot rage flooded through me, washing away the fear and pain and betrayal. They were happy. They were pleased. My brother was being carried away in an ambulance, and they were celebrating. I stood up slowly, and maybe something in my movement caught Marcus's attention because he turned to look at me. Natasha, are you okay? What did you put in his drink? I asked loudly, loud enough that people nearby stopped crying and turned to look at me, loud enough that my voice carried across the terrace in the suddenly quiet evening. Marcus's face flickered with confusion. What? Baby, what are you talking about? What did you put in his drink? I repeated, louder now, moving toward him. What poison did you use, Marcus? The same one you tried to give me? Yara stood up, her face pale. Natasha, you're in shock. You're not making sense. Let's get you some water. Don't you dare, I snarled at her, and something in my tone made her step back. Don't you dare pretend to care about me. I heard you. I heard both of you in the wine cellar. I heard everything. The color drained from both their faces. Marcus started shaking his head, trying to laugh it off. You're confused. You're upset about Terrence. Let me take you. Show them, I said to no one in particular, addressing the air. The cameras I knew were hidden everywhere. Show everyone what they really are. And then the giant screens that had been showing slideshow photos of Yara and Terrence throughout the evening flickered and changed. The image that appeared was crystal clear. Marcus and Yara in the wine cellar, kissing, touching, talking about murdering me and Terrence. The audio played, their voices echoing across the terrace, discussing $8 million and accidents and poisons and inheritance. After tonight, your sister won't suspect a thing. Poor naive Natasha. The guests gasped, horrified murmurs spreading through the crowd. Marcus and Yara stood frozen, watching their own crime play out on the screens. And then more footage appeared, clips from the past 6 weeks that Terrence had secretly recorded. Marcus and Yara in hotels together. Yara researching poisons on her computer. Marcus transferring money to offshore accounts. Phone conversations planning every detail of their murders. No, Yara whispered, her face a mask of panic. No, this isn't. We were just what? A voice said from behind her. Just planning a double homicide. A woman stepped out of the crowd, someone I thought was one of Yara's cousins from out of town. But now she pulled out a badge, her face hard and professional. Kira Volkov, I'm Agent Maria Santos with Interpol. You're under arrest for multiple counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and about 6 other charges I'm going to enjoy reading to you. 2 more guests revealed themselves as FBI agents, moving toward Marcus. Marcus Chen, you're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, and murder in connection with the deaths of Robert and Patricia Williams. My parents. They just said Marcus was being charged with my parents' murders, which meant they had evidence, which meant what happened to my parents wasn't an accident, which meant everything I'd suspected, everything I tried to tell myself was just grief-induced paranoia, was true. I couldn't hold it together anymore. My legs gave out, and I sank to the ground as Marcus and Yara were handcuffed and read their rights. The careful control I'd maintained all evening shattered, and I started crying, deep, wrenching sobs that came from the very core of my being. My parents, my husband, my sister-in-law. My entire life had been built on lies and murder and betrayal. I don't know how long I sat there on the beautiful terrace in my sage green dress, crying among the scattered champagne glasses and uneaten desserts. People moved around me, agents and police and federal prosecutors, processing the crime scene that used to be a wedding. Eventually, someone sat down beside me and put their arm around my shoulders. It was Terrence. My brother, who was supposed to be in an ambulance, was sitting beside me, very much alive and healthy. Hey, he said gently. It's over. We got them. I turned and threw my arms around him, holding on to him like I was drowning, and he was the only solid thing in the universe. He held me back just as tightly, and I felt his chest shaking. He was crying too, this strong man who'd held our entire family together, who'd planned this elaborate trap, who'd risked his life to bring justice for our parents. "I'm sorry," he whispered into my hair. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. I'm sorry for all of it." "Don't," I choked out. "Don't apologize. You saved my life. You saved both our lives." We sat there together while the authorities worked around us. Two orphans who'd almost become murder victims, holding on to each other in the wreckage of the elaborate trap we'd set. The sun was beginning to sink beneath the vineyard hills, painting the chaos in soft pink and gold, like the world didn't understand that everything had changed, like it still believed in happily ever afters. I stared out over the terrace. Guests were being interviewed. Agents whispered into radios. Yara and Marcus were long gone now, dragged away in cuffs. And still, Terrence and I just sat there, quiet, breathing, processing. No one came near us. No one dared. We weren't victims. We weren't heroes. We were the survivors of something ancient and ugly, something that wore a tuxedo and smiled for photos while planning our deaths. Eventually, one of the agents, a tall man in a sharp black suit, approached us. His face was serious, respectful. He knelt down beside us like someone delivering news at a funeral. "There's someone here who's been waiting to speak with you," he said quietly. I blinked. "Who?" He didn't answer, just stepped back and motioned. And then I saw her. A woman stepped through the crowd, small, elegant, wearing a navy blue coat and a soft scarf over her shoulders. Her eyes were rimmed with tears. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing, to believe what I was seeing, because the woman walking toward us was our mother, our dead mother. "Hi, baby," she said softly. Her voice cracked, like she hadn't spoken those words in years. "Mom?" I whispered. She reached us, and Terrence stood up so fast his chair fell over. She reached for his hand, then mine. It was real, touched her wrist, her face, her hair. She smelled like gardenias, just like I remembered, just like home. "But the fire," I choked. "We buried you." She nodded, her eyes full of guilt and love and grief. "I didn't die. I was pulled out before the house collapsed. I was in a coma for weeks. And when I woke up, the FBI told me I couldn't go back." My stomach dropped. "Why?" She looked around, made sure no one else was listening. "Because I was working with them. I was an informant against the Russian mob." Terrence let out a sound, a sharp, pained exhale, like someone had kicked him in the chest. "I thought I was protecting you," she said. "But they found out. The fire, it wasn't faulty wiring. It was a hit. On me. On us." The world tilted. It had never been random. It had never been fate. Our parents hadn't just died. They'd been targeted. Because our mother tried to do the right thing. I felt a sob rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't a child anymore. "I couldn't come back," she said, voice trembling. "But when I saw Yara's face in the Interpol system, I knew. I recognized her. She was on a list of known assets tied to multiple deaths." She reached out and touched my face. I tipped off Terrence through a burner account. I watched the wedding live stream from a safe house. I was terrified, but I knew you'd finish what I started. None of us said anything for a long time. What could we say? We were three ghosts, stitched together by fire, betrayal, and survival. Eventually, she hugged us both, fiercely, like a mother who'd lost too much time. And in that moment, I forgave her. All of it. Because the only reason I was alive was because she disappeared. The next few months blurred by. Yara, or Kira Volkov, was extradited, then sentenced to life without parole for multiple counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and identity theft. The trial was international news. Her crimes spanned continents. Marcus was sentenced to 25 years for embezzlement, conspiracy, attempted murder, and obstruction of justice. He cried in court. He begged. He said he'd been manipulated. Maybe he had. I didn't care. I didn't attend the sentencing. I had no interest in watching him pretend he was sorry. But he wrote me a letter. Natasha, I started this because I was desperate, but Yara made it easy. She made it seem like the only way. You were the one real thing in my life, and I ruined it. I'm sorry. I burned the letter. Some apologies don't deserve to be read twice. We held a private ceremony for our parents. Just me, Terrence, and Mom, Patricia. We scattered their ashes in the vineyard, said the goodbyes we never really got to say, and when it was done, we walked away together. Not as victims, but as a family that refused to break. A year later, the vineyard looks different. Terrence bought it. He turned it into a foundation headquarters for victims of fraud and financial crimes, a place where people who were almost destroyed like we were can find healing, hope, and help. He also married Agent Maria Santos. Yeah, the Interpol agent who arrested Yara. Turns out she was the real soulmate all along. And honestly, I've never seen him look happier. Mom came out of witness protection last spring. She bought a house near the hospital where I work. We do Sunday dinners now. She brings flowers to the break room. She's writing a book about what happened, about what she gave up to keep us alive. And me? I took a sabbatical, spent some time in therapy, adopted a dog named Bowie, and slowly, started learning how to trust again. Last night we had dinner, just the family, Terrence and Maria, Mom, me, and Maria's brother, Alex, who works in law enforcement too. He made me laugh, a lot. He didn't ask about the past. He didn't look at me with pity. And when he offered to walk me to my car, I let him. We stood outside under the stars, the vineyard humming softly behind us. He didn't try to kiss me, just smiled and said, "You're stronger than most people I know." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. But then, this morning, I got a letter. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. No signature. Yara wasn't working alone. She had another partner, someone close, someone you trust. I froze, looked around the kitchen. The dog was barking, the kettle was boiling, and at the window, a family friend, someone who'd been at the wedding, was walking up the path with a pie in their hands, smiling, waving, too friendly, too familiar. And suddenly, I didn't feel safe. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because some stories don't end with justice. Some stories just get quieter until the next betrayal begins.